Good afternoon to you all at home. This is Business Live with me. On this Friday, Darren McCaffrey. Well, staying kind of with politics, but with the business angle to it. Donald Trump is on his way home following his tour of the Gulf states. The trip wasn't the typical Middle East tour for an American president with a focus on trade deals rather than necessarily on peace deals. He's returning to Washington with what he says is $2 trillion worth of investment following deals on defence, aviation and artificial intelligence. Well, let's speak to Professor David Bach, a former dean at Yale and currently president of the Institute for Management Development. Very good afternoon to you. I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump has had a pretty good week. It is a tour that seems to have gone, at least on the surface, pretty well.
No, I think that's right. He'll be absolutely delighted with the trip, with the coverage, of course, the way he was received. And he was making deals. And that is, of course, what he likes doing. He's been touting the success. You mentioned some of the numbers, and I'm sure he's going to be quite pleased with the success he's had.
And David, just in regards to those numbers, I mean, how much can we kind of trust them? I mean, all rather large, 2 trillion, it was hundreds of billions of dollars in Saudi, more than $1 trillion in Qatar. I mean, these are pledges of investment that might not come to fruition. Is that fair?
I think that's absolutely fair. I think there have been a couple of examples, the plane deal with Qatar that people looked at and said, actually, the number is a little bit lower. And, some of these figures are multiple times the annual GDP of some of the Gulf states. So clearly the numbers are very, very big. It depends on how you count them. But look, even if you cut this in half or, even divide it by 5, these are really, really big numbers. There's no question that the Gulf states have committed themselves to big purchases of U.S. goods and big investments in the U.S. And that's why I think the president is going to feel that he achieved what he wanted to, again, particularly because of the headlines that he's been looking for.
And David, it's fair to say, isn't it, this wasn't just a success for Donald Trump, in many ways a success for those Gulf states too, in the sense that they're grappling around for an economic strategy beyond oil and gas.
Well, to me, that's the most significant outcome here, right? The emphasis on artificial intelligence, you noted in your introduction, defense and aviation. Those are two industries that always do well when a U.S. president travels to that part of the world. But the focus on artificial intelligence really is new. I mean, the commitments about sales of the most advanced U.S. designed chips by NVIDIA is massive. This is going to lead, if it happens as envisioned, to the most sophisticated AI data centers outside the United States. It's something that all of these Gulf states have been looking for. And it, further accelerates their already pretty impressive leadership in this clear industry of the future as they're moving beyond an economy based on oil.
And David, beyond this now, where do you think the man who loves to say he likes the art of the deal, and you get the impression he's still fundamentally a businessman rather than a politician at heart, where will Donald Trump be looking to next, if you like, to try and make a deal on this, maybe not on the scale, but on a similar scale maybe to what we've seen in the last week?
Well, look, the deal that we've all been waiting for, that business leaders around the world have been waiting for, is the biggest deal of them all. It's the grand bargain with China. Of course, last week we had the meetings here in Geneva, just a couple of kilometers from where I'm based. But I don't think it produced exactly the kind of breakthrough that people were hoping for. I mean, the two countries stepped back from the brink, lower tariffs, but U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods are still much higher than they were before President Trump took office. And so the deal that could have the immediate, or the sort of biggest immediate impact on the prospects for the global economy is, of course, sort of a meaningful, permanent de-escalation of the trade tensions between the United States and China. My sense is that's a whole lot more difficult than going to the Middle East, spending time with local rulers and signing some investment agreements.
OK, David, really appreciate your time this afternoon for us live there in Switzerland. Thank you very much indeed for your insights. Thank you.
Of course.
Well, one company that has been weathering the current storm of global uncertainty is Bosch, whose UK and Ireland division has just posted £3.3 billion worth of sales in the last fiscal years. Well, I've been speaking to its UK managing director about global trade, tariffs, and the UK's relationship with the EU. But I began by asking him about why the company has used its results announcement to call on the government to invest more in hydrogen power in the transition to net zero.
The issue we have is that in our climate conditions in Europe, the amount of green electricity that we can generate it will always be limited, and that's why we need green electricity from countries that are far away. In the Middle East, for example, where the sun is shining more or wind is blowing more than here. And that is actually where hydrogen comes into play, because then you need hydrogen for storage and for transport. So essentially what hydrogen is, it is complementing electricity from renewables. And if you look at the demand for green electricity, you see quite clearly that we will not be able to generate all of that here in our countries.
Okay. Let's talk about the challenges that you have mentioned. I mean, clearly one of those must be around trade globally. That's been through a pretty tumultuous time over the last couple of months. What impact is that having on the business here in the UK, if any, but certainly globally with the tariffs that we've seen imposed by the United States?
All right, tariffs, I would say that is probably in the time sequence, that is the very last of those challenges that are being thrown at us. I mean, for tariffs, in general, I would say at the end of the day, always the consumer pays. So it is a disadvantage to the consumer. What we'll get at the end of the day, once the dust settles, nobody can tell. It could well be that at the end we're looking at a flat 10% import duty into the US for everyone, and not much else. But it's pure speculation. We'll see.
You're a
what I would always
the uncertainty must be harmful.
Yeah, well, we're getting used to this world of uncertainties. But what I would certainly say for tariffs is, you know, we have complex supply chains, particularly in automotive, and there are knock-on effects from what's happening in other parts of the world. So, for example, the US-China friction that we are currently experiencing has definitely effects on the UK that we probably don't see yet or find hard to predict at this point, but you will see them. So our message would always be we need multilateral solutions here, you know, and as much as I appreciate the UK-US deal, we need to see the detail, obviously, but that's great news. But the solution lies with multilateral solutions. And the biggest trading partner, I would always say that, is still the EU, where a lot of friction has been added through Brexit. Just to give you an example, take one of our legal entities, Robert Bosch Limited. We used to have, before Brexit, we used to have about 50 import transactions per year. Now we have 10,000.
So you want to see the government do more when it comes to resetting our relationship with the European Union? I mean, there is a big summit in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, I mean, that is very high up on our agenda, and we'd like to see an ambitious reset of that relationship, which is still the most important one for us in our markets.
Okay, and just very finally, since we're in the UK and we're talking about the impact that these tax rises may well have had on you guys. I mean, you employ thousands of people in this country. Tax has increased quite significantly, hasn't it, in the last couple of months? What's your sense of that, the impact it's had on your business? Can you afford it, frankly? And the government's business agenda here in the UK, is it favourable, do you think?
No, of course it's not. I mean, consumer confidence is already low. It's not where it should be. GDP growth is low, and everything that takes purchasing power away from the consumers is, of course, not working well for business. That's very clear.
Managing director of Bosch speaking to me yesterday. We're just going to bring you some pictures. This is Hadi Matar, who is 27 years old. This is him arriving in court in New York earlier, of course. This is the New Jersey man who stabbed and partially blind the novelist Salman Rushdie on a New York lecture stage a couple of years ago. Well, he's been sentenced to 25 years in prison this afternoon. Salman Rushdie, of course, was speaking on stage in in front of an audience in August 2022 when he was stabbed multiple times in the face and neck. Well, Hadi Matar, who you can currently see on your screen, he was convicted of attempted murder and assault earlier this year, and today was sentenced to 25 years in prison. And we'll have more on that story with Jonathan Savios on the News Hour from 5 o'clock here on Sky News. Now, if you enjoyed this next item, please do give us a thumbs up. Or you can hit, of course, that like button. Most of us are now used to expressing our appreciation online by clicking on the thumbs up sign, which is 20 years old this weekend and is now used apparently a whopping 6 trillion times a year. Well, its inventor, Bob Goodson, has co-authored a new book on the symbol, and delighted to say Bob joins me now. A very good afternoon, or thumbs up to you, Bob. I suppose the first question is, when did you come up with this idea of the thumbs up, the like button?
So I was living in San Francisco in the early 2000s, working for a company called Yelp. And we were looking for a way to help users interact with and share their feedback on content. And so it was really just an afternoon's work for us, but we came up with a smoother way to do that and put 3 emotional reaction options onto these reviews.
In saying that, I mean, it's quite simple, isn't it? You know, we all do the thumbs up when we like something. In fact, if anyone uses it more than anyone, it's Donald Trump who uses it quite a lot. So it's quite a simple idea in many regards. But how did you come to it? Was there a long thought process, or was there a kind of instantaneous, actually, this will work?
Yeah, something that we cover in the book is the fact that this little piece of technology, which is now the most used user interface feature of any feature, really came about through a sort of evolution. Many thousands of hands working on it over many years, and each making these little incremental changes without really having that long-term thought or awareness. And we think that by drawing attention to how this feature was developed over many years, and in a way, this is a piece of tech history that we've put together, as well as how it affects us as people. We interviewed many neuroscientists and psychologists in the process of understanding how it affects us and how it became so popular. You know, it ended up being a keyhole for us to understand how technology really gets developed, how Silicon Valley works. And there are some lessons there for future waves of technology.
Yeah, indeed, and I think we've actually got the original scribble of what it looked like when you did come up with it. 6 trillion times a year is a hell of a lot. I mean, it really has taken off. But it's fair to say, isn't it, that it's got negative connotations too. You know, a lot of people have been quite critical about this sense that something's either good or bad, and that lots of people now feel like they need those likes.
Yeah, that's right. We at Yelp, we created it in the context of local business reviews, but over the following few years, it moved into social media, and 3 years later was adopted by Facebook, and it's really sort of become one of the elements that's inherent in social media and in messaging as well. And so it is caught up now with the pros and cons of social media. Much has been said about that, and we think that, you know, the sorts of observations we're able to make hopefully will improve people's decision making about, you know, when and how to use social media and indeed this feature, as well as some reflections on the fact that it's still evolving. You know, it's only 20 years old, and this feature is still evolving quite rapidly.
Yeah, indeed. It's, there are all different types of emojis these days, aren't there? What are you working on next, I suppose, is the big question. Or are you working on something next that could be equally transformative and equally as popular? Or where do you think that market is going to go?
Well, one of the things that is moving really quite quickly and doesn't get too much attention right now, considering how important it is, are brain-computer interfaces. This is the technology that allows us to interact with computing via thought. And some very important experiments and indeed trials have been run in the past few months. And some of this technology has received FDA approval as well in the United States. And so when we think about the future of liking, we have to think about the types of interfaces we'll have to computing. And eventually, I do believe that we'll be in a place where we're primarily interacting with computing directly via thought. And at that point, we may not need to press a button at all because our emotions may indeed be evident from how we react.
OK, I mean, that's a slightly daunting thought, I'm not going to lie, Bob, but we really appreciate your time. I'm sure you'll have a little celebration this weekend, 20 years on since you helped invent that like button. Thank you very much indeed. And it's always thumbs up here on Business Live. That is it from me for today, and indeed for the weekend. We're, of course, back at 11:30 on Monday morning. Do join me then, if you can. Coming up next, though, it is the News Hour with Jonathan Samuels, the very latest from Albania and Turkey, where there have been very high-level talks involving Ukraine and, of course, that tragic fire in Bicester. Stay tuned for that. Have a nice weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Goodbye.